So I have here a new 2DS XL and a new 3DS XL, and I'm just going to talk about the differences between them as far as like choosing which one's right for you. Obviously, the main difference is that this one does not play 3D, and this one does. If that matters to you, then you know that may be the determining factor right there. Um, the other big difference is that this one is going to cost a lot more than this one, um, depending on what your budget is. These ones I find new 3DSs popping up on Mercari pretty often. They can range anywhere from, depending on the condition, they can range anywhere from $180, $170 to as much as $300, depending on a number of factors. In particular, the outer casing, the condition of it, and if it's a special edition one. Like there's a Pikachu one floating around. It's pretty cute. A lot of people like that, but that one's going to be substantially more expensive than a plain black one like this. This one I do have a case on, a little protective case, because the finish on these is it's made of like sugar or something. It just like wears off so easily. I've seen so many of these 3DSs, and in particular the red ones, where the grip area, like where you would hold it on the back of the bottom side, and then on the actual the interior around the buttons, is just completely worn away, as though like it looks like it was like licked off or something. But it does not take much to make these look like crap. This one looks pretty good, which is why I bought it. Um, but that's something to look out for. I wouldn't pay extra for one that has that worn off, because it looks just terrible, unless you're planning to go like the full way and completely replace the housing, or even put a case on it like this one, maybe that's not translucent. Um, that may be a concern. Otherwise, as far as these go, aside from the 3D, there's also the obvious difference in the shells. This one, the 2DS, is nicely rounded. It's actually quite comfortable to hold. It's got this nice matte plastic surface. This one will not wear off the same way the 3DS will. So these all, I tend to find that the 2DSs kind of keep a lot better. They look pretty good, even used. I never really felt the need to put a case on this one. It feels like it's made of like Lego plastic or something. It's very knock around friendly. You can put it in your pocket and not really worry about it. This one I tend to baby a little more, because I feel like this one would suffer a lot more for the wear. The other big difference is this has this outer camera here. The 2DS does not. For whatever that matters. It does have the inner camera. You can barely see it inside of the hinge here. The other thing, as far as these are concerned, and this is something that kind of is maybe a personal bugbear. I don't know if it bothers everybody else or not, but you can see on the 3DS that the screen is limited to the actual play area. This is the only glass part. This part inside of here is the same matte plastic as down here. So that's, this does not make any kind of contact with the buttons below. The 2DS, on the other hand, has a kind of annoying build quality to it, where this entire bit up here is glass or plastic or whatever it is. And it's, see if I can get to show. You can see a little bit over here. See if it'll focus. You can see the little ring that's developed on the top side. That is actually, a lot of people mistake that for scratching. It's not a scratch. It's just oil from your fingers that remains on the circle pad, and sometimes on the D-pad as well if you're using the D-pad, and then these buttons over here, and especially this little circle pad here. They sit completely flush with the top screen up here, and what that results in is you'll get a few marks here and there. They won't hurt it. They just look bad. They bother me because they look gross. You can wipe them off with like a microfiber cloth. They will come off easily. It's just something to be aware of. It's not going to damage the system, but you maybe don't want to like let it go. I don't know if you like really let it build up. They don't really obscure the play field very much. It's really like this outer black bit, which is very, very reflective. That's another thing, is that I feel like the 2DS XL screen is a lot more reflective than the 3DS XL's screen. I can see my own face a lot of time when the screen goes black, and that's sort of annoying. But it's not the end of the world or anything. because you can see the screens, the actual play area of the screen is about the same size. I feel like the 3DS is maybe just a little bit bigger, but I mean, for most games, that you probably would never even notice. Um, the other, let's see if I can think of anything else that's kind of really stood out to me. Oh, and I think a lot of people complain about with the 2DS. The 3DS speakers are up here, so you get some nice stereo sound. The 2DS also has stereo speakers, but they're not up here. They're in fact down here on the corners, and it's very easy to accidentally mute mute your game while you're playing. If you're holding it and your palm happens to come up right against the edge of the console, it can actually completely block out the sound. Um, I don't find it to be that big of a problem. It's pretty rare that that happens, and it's never something that's going to like ruin my play experience. In fact, the way you hold the 3DS typically, I have fairly large adult hands, so I might hold it like this, and if you're you can imagine my other hand on the other side. I'm using it to hold up the camera, but the sound actually, it's kind of clever. The sound will actually be amplified by the crook of your hands and sort of project into your own face. So people who are kind of on the other side of you won't necessarily hear it as loudly as you will. Um, if that matters to you, like I don't know, if you're perhaps living with other people, if you're with your parents or something, if you're a little younger, this might actually be a good feature for you, especially if you don't play with headphones. These do both have the headphone jack, thankfully. That could be something. It might bother you. It might not. I don't personally think it's a problem. Um, I will say too that the buttons are a lot different on the 2DS than they are on the 3DS. You can see that these are kind of convex, slightly rounded buttons. Same for the start and select buttons and the D-pad. The D-pad is nice and flat and flush. The buttons on the 2DS, on the other hand, are they are the print is recessed into the button. It's actually, if we can get to focus, you can see that they are actually embossed into the buttons where these are etched with a nice colored buttons here. And then the D-pad feels substantially more, I don't want to say cheap, but it does feel cheap compared to this one. Although this one, I will say, is very noisy. This one is less so. It is kind of clicky noisy, but not nearly as much as this one. I don't know if it picks up on the microphone on my phone or not. But this does almost get annoying on this one. I feel like this D-pad is much more friendly as far as that's concerned. Otherwise, software is completely identical. They both are the new model, and they're able to play all of the games on the 3DS, including the ones that are exclusive to the new 3DS model, which is like 7 or 8 games, or maybe more. I don't know. There's only really a handful that I personally think are worth caring about, but my tastes are maybe a little different than the average player. I'm not into like Pokemon or Fire Emblem or any of that stuff, but that's just me. The big thing, of course, is the 3D. If you don't care about the 3D, it's not going to matter to you. You can see I have Space Harrier pulled up here. Space Harrier it plays just fine. It just looks like normal Space Harrier. But I do feel like I would have liked. I owned this one first, and I bought this one later, so this one doesn't have all my software. I bought it with all these games loaded on, which is pretty cool. So I'm reluctant to transfer my things onto here. I do feel like I'm missing something with the 3D in certain games. It would be really cool in Space Harrier, but not necessary to play because Space Harrier was never really like intended to be a 3D game, at least in the arcades. On the other hand, I really found it to be a problem with games like Super Mario 3D Land, where there are entire sections, like bonus sections, where the entire gimmick is that without the depth, it's very hard to tell exactly where you need to jump or where the secret entrance is. Like, you'll have a pile of blocks, and if you're looking at it in 2D, it appears to be just like maybe the side of a pyramid or something. But if you have the depth on, you can actually see where one of the blocks is floating closer to you, and the perspective is changed to make it look as though it's part of the wall behind it, but actually there's like the star or whatever is hidden behind it. That's really the only time I encountered a problem where I was like, man, this would be a lot better in 3D than it is. Uh, Again, though, that's mostly restricted to just Nintendo published and developed games. Most other games, if you're playing like Shin Megami Tensei or I don't know, basically any of the RPGs where it's like the 3D is kind of cool, but it's not really. It's just like a little additive feature. It's not like, it doesn't feel like it's a necessary component for the gameplay. Then it's whatever. It's basically the same on here as on this one. Um, so it just comes down to personal preference really and cost. If you're willing to pay for it, this one is, to me, this one is like the best model of 3DS that there is. It's got all the features. It's got all the stuff. The build quality is a lot better. It generally just feels more solid. It is absolutely much heavier. That's another concern. If you want a lighter console, this is lighter for sure. I actually have my little food scale here so that I can measure them and give a scientific representation. I don't know if this will show up on the camera or not, but let's see if it does. There we go. So the 2DS XL comes in at about 256 grams, and the 3DS XL by comparison, and I don't think this case that I have on here is going to add a lot of weight. If it does, it's a trivial amount. This ranks in at about 379 grams, or give or take a few, nearly 50% heavier than the 2DS XL. So, I don't know if it's going to like ruin your hands or anything, but it might tire you out if you're playing for long sessions. I tend to play for, in short bursts while I'm out. That's kind of my preferred usage of the thing. They're both, the screens are about the same size. I think really the play experience is going to be mostly the same. This one's a little more pocket friendly. You can see them stacked on top of each other. The 2DS almost looks like it's a little bit longer, like barely, because this case even is adding a little bit. They might even be like, they're pretty close. This hinge, actually, I don't know if I can show it very well, but even with this hinge on here, it's only about as wide as the 3DS is. It's not a substantial difference. And then for comparison's sake, I don't have an original 3DS to compare it to, and I don't have the non-XL model of the 3DS to compare it to either. So I just brought the closest thing I have, which is a DS Lite, which I think is roughly the size of an original 3DS, and you can see that these are quite a bit bigger than this is. Yeah, by comparison, it's about maybe 20% longer, and maybe about just a little bit wider. If you line them up quite right, it goes just a little beyond with the hinge and a little out this way. And I'm curious how much the DS Lite weighs. I can't imagine it's that much, but it may be comparable to the 2DS XL. 212. So it's a little bit lighter than the 2DS XL, but not by a ton. It's lighter by less than the 3DS is heavier than the 2DS, if that makes any sense, by a wide margin. As far as price is concerned, I see 2DSs kind of seem to me to have a wider range of price. I watch Mercari a lot for these things. These tend to run, in my experience, anywhere between, like, I've seen them as low as $100 and as high as $250. These tend to start around $180, $190, $200, and can go all the way up to $300 depending on what kind of software is on them. A lot of sellers will have these preloaded with maybe games that they bought. That's how I bought this one. It's got a ton of virtual console games on it, which was a lot of the attraction for me. I would say definitely look for these and make sure that you're reading the listings very closely, because one might be cheap. You might see one that's cheap and want to jump on it. The problem with that is that if it could be damaged. Look at the photos very closely, especially right here and right here along these edges, and the hinges. The hinges are where they tend to fail, especially right here and right here. Um, you don't want to overpay for one of these, but you can find good deals if you look. This one, when I bought it, in fact, came with a couple of DS games and this very cool Club Nintendo pouch came with it too. And it was 300 for this and the games and this pouch, and like came with like 2 charging cables. This pouch by itself was worth $40 aftermarket, and then this came with dozens of virtual console games, including a few full 3DS games. It's like got like all the Marios, all the Zeldas. This one actually has some of the ambassador titles on it too, which was pretty cool. Those I know go for a premium nowadays. But I mean, if you're willing to look, you can find good deals on there pretty easily. Just don't jump on the first thing you see, but also don't be afraid to jump on a deal either. It's use your own discretion. Yeah, especially if it comes with games, even if it comes with like regular DS games. If you're fortunate enough to have a store nearby that you can trade them in, you can recoup some of the cost. I occasionally will buy things that come with a pack of games I don't even care about or want, just for the sake of selling them off and just getting back a little bit of that money. But yeah, I hope this helps as far as picking a console to get. My personal recommendation is if you just want to play 3DS games, this is fine. This is better. They're both good. It comes down to cost and what you're willing to spend and what kind of deals you can find. And maybe if you're willing to wait and just, watch Mercari or eBay like a hawk, you can find something. You can find good things like this.